Hey everybody, Lisa Michaels here. We're going to see some people joining us soon. So, I'm Lisa Michaels. I am a registered nurse and I am a certified rapid transformational hypnotherapist trained by Marissa Peer with her incredible program that she has developed. And I am here, I'm also an author of my recently released book titled Breaking Free from the Lies That Bind You, which is really the undoing of your childhood. We all have things from our childhood that affect us in one degree or another. And a lot of times what I'm seeing in with my clients is that for the most part, those childhood issues don't really start screaming at us until we get a little older. For instance, if you have difficulty losing weight, but it doesn't show up until later on in life, it's typically because your metabolism slows and that type of thing. So anyway, getting back to why we are here. So this is my new conversation series, and it's titled It's All in Your Head, because everything that we do, experience, habits, blocks, all of these things are all in our head. And it is up to us to keep them the same or change them, but they are all quite malleable. So if you are doing something that is not the direction that you want to be moving in, then I promise you it's all in your head and you can change that. And what we're going to talk about tonight specifically is expectations, because expectations are the silent killer of your peace, I promise you. I mean, because listen, we have expectations around everything, right? We have expectations. If you go to to a restaurant, you expect the food to be good. You expect your server to be incredibly nice and happy and deliver your food in a timely manner and take good care of you. You have expectations with your friends. Pretty much everybody that you encounter, we are programmed to have expectations. But if you don't talk about those expectations and have those expectations agreed upon, then more times than not you're going to be frustrated. I'll give you an example. I think of a very common issue. I think it is common for in-laws to have expectations about, incoming members to the family by marriage. So in my particular situation, my mother-in-law, who I love dearly, and may she rest in peace, but anyway, when she found out that her son was marrying me, because I was quite bubbly then, just like I am now, and always smiling and whatnot, she got excited because she saw me as this daughter that she never had, right? And so she developed all of these expectations in her mind, but she never had a conversation with me about it. She just expected me to know what I was supposed to do, and that was to pretty much call her all the time. And my daughter and I just had a conversation about this last week because I really don't do that. I don't like talking on the phone. And if I do get you on the phone, I'm going to talk your ear off. So it's like I think most people avoid talking to me on the phone for that reason. But anyway, my mother-in-law decided that I was going to be this daughter that she never had, and that's really not my personality. I'm very I always have things going on, and so I was always quite busy, and I didn't have time for these types of things. I didn't even have those conversations with my own mother. So those expectations that were all created in her head caused her, not just with me, but she did that with everybody that she had a relationship with, her nieces, her nephews, everybody in her life. She had these implied expectations that nobody ever agreed on. So she really lived very, very frustrated. She had a very frustrated life, which was a shame. But that being said, that was an unagreed upon expectation that caused her a lot of grief, and it actually caused me a lot of grief too, because I could feel the weight of those expectations, and people can feel the weight of your expectations. Um, I think a very common mistake that parents make is that their adult children should stay in touch with them all the time and um, give them a lot of attention. But the truth of the matter is, first of all, what did you teach them? How did you teach them to behave? Did they see you doing that when they were a child? And did you cultivate that in them, sort of that type of behavior in them? Because, like for me, that was not done. So, that was not something that I really was taught to do. And then, of course, I didn't teach my daughter that. We actually schedule calls for each other so that we can respect each other's time instead of just, dropping the line, because in most cases one of us is not available. And that's the case. People have their lives. So for a parent to have that expectation of their child or vice versa, and that is not agreed upon by both parties, it's going to cause somebody a lot of frustration. And whether it's the receiver of the expectation or the one that has the expectation, both people will end up disappointed because, like I said, you can feel the weight of someone's expectations. And that was probably one of the best things that I did with my daughter, my grandkids, and my son-in-law, was when I lifted all of my expectations on them. Because the relationships that I was in for 33 years, that person that I was in that relationship with, of course, his mother had all those expectations, so he came with a lot of expectations too, and those extended to um, my daughter, which was his stepdaughter, and then her family, and you just can't do that. You end up frustrated. You will always end up frustrated when when you have these unagreed upon expectations, and especially, like I said, if you haven't set the tone for that, and that's not part of who they are, especially if it's not part of who they are, you're really going to be disappointed. Like my mother-in-law, and it wasn't something that I did intentional. It was just something that I wasn't, I was not, that was not the type of person that I am. I'm not a regular caller. So, it's very frustrating. So, another thing that I hear so often, and it's kind of sad, but it's, again, reality, and that is with men when they retire, and it can happen with a woman as well, but let's say whoever in the household gives their soul to their job, which is very common. It's very common when you have, especially in my generation, the men most often were out of the house a lot working, and so the children bonded with the mother because the mother was most likely a housewife that took care of the kids, or spent most of the time with the kids anyway, and so those kids bonded with the mother, but they didn't quite bond with the father the same way because the father was always working. And that doesn't bother the father so much until he gets older and he retires. And then now he wants this relationship with his children. And, it's kind of hard to change everybody's patterns, when just because you come out, or you're retiring and whatnot. And it's a lot to expect of your kids to change their life because you don't work anymore. It just depends on how strong your relationship is with them. I'm not saying it's not possible, but I hear it a lot. I hear it a lot with men, that are maybe, let's say, between 60 and 80, that generation especially. But I'm sure it still goes on now, and it's sad to see that. It's sad to see them wanting to have that relationship, and I would love to have a deeper relationship with my daughter. But what was I doing? I was working. So that was the generation that I came up in. That's my family were workers, right? So, so I fell into that trap as well. So it's, it can be difficult. Now, what can you do instead? What you can do instead is drop the expectations, or have a conversation. Because don't misunderstand boundaries and standards with expectations. What am I talking about? So you have a standard of how you want to operate, like maybe what a friendship looks like to you. You have standards, right? So that when you're in a relationship with somebody, you still feel good about that relationship, right? And then there's expectations, but those expectations have to be spelled out. So if your standard of a friendship is that, when I have a when I have a relationship with somebody that I call a friend, maybe, I want to have lunch with them once a month, or maybe I want to have a phone call every once in a while. But you have to make sure that that is a mutual thing, right? Because if it's not mutual, then you're asking the other person to do something that they don't want to really do or is not natural for them, right? So, but that's the difference. So let's say for me, relationships have to be in balance. So in other words, if I engage with you, and for whatever reason, whether we go to lunch or whatever the extent of our engagement is, or interaction with each other is, if when I leave your presence, I feel drained, or I'm trying to read through the lines because what you're saying doesn't match what you're doing, kind of thing, right? If I leave a person's presence like that too often, then I will sever that relationship. Why? Well, because I have standards. Your actions have to match what's coming out of your mouth. Doesn't matter what it is. And again, the relationship between myself and another person, you want it to be a natural occurrence, right? You don't want it to be forced anyway. But if I am feeling drained when I leave the presence of someone, that's somebody that I really don't, they don't get to stay in my life. They have to be bringing something pretty tremendous to leave me in that state. Because what's happening is, because I'm dealing with this situation, and what's happening is the person says one thing, but I can feel different, and their actions are not in alignment with what they're saying. So what that does is it makes you question your own intuition. Like, wait a minute, is this just me, and this isn't really happening, or is it really happening? And so then I'm forced to do a deep dive evaluation on the situation without emotion and determine, okay, is this a healthy environment or not? And is it something that's worth me having a conversation? Or is it just best to cut ties because the person is draining me, right? So those are important markers. So that's your standards, and then you have the expectations. So if I wanted to continue to engage with this particular individual, then I would sit down and have a conversation with them and say, hey, what's really going on? Because this is saying one thing and this is saying another. And I would go into that conversation. But like I said, that person has to be bringing some kind of value for me to want to maintain the relationship. And that should be the same with somebody that's dealing with me. I don't ever want to be a drain on you. If I drain your energy, then I'm not right for you. And of course, there's going to be people that that I don't align with. So like I said, if you ignore that stuff and you let that imbalance continue, and who knows why people do this? Why they maybe they don't want to speak the truth. They're afraid to hurt your feelings, or they want to keep up a particular image. Whatever the reasons are, they have to be hashed out or eliminated, because that's not a healthy balance, right? So the expectation cannot meet the standards, your standards, and you must have standards. You must have boundaries. People will walk all over you, and you'll be a very unhappy person if you don't have standards and boundaries. So, but just recognizing that difference, that we have standards that we don't have to negotiate with anybody if we don't want to. Your standards are your standards. That's you should stay true to them, and you will be happy if you stay true to your boundaries and your standards, right? The expectations have to be agreed upon or a natural occurrence. sometimes they're a natural occurrence, but they can't just be implied. And there's a lot of societal norms that are implied that, that I just don't agree with. We won't get into those tonight, but, I think a societal norm could be in certain cultures, and I think it was actually in my mother-in-law's sort of a cultural thing too, that that the daughter should be calling the mother, but I was not from her culture, and I respect other cultures, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to be able to fall in line with them, and really no one should have that expectation on you. They should accept you as who you are. And respect your background and your standards and all of your the way that you operate, right? You're not supposed to be manipulated into a mold. You're supposed to be able to be who you are. So anyway, so I don't see any questions. I am super, super excited about my new show. I absolutely am looking forward to the next episode. The next episode is going to be around New Year's resolutions and why most New Year's resolutions fail and what you can do to change it. So remember, if you want to minimize your frustration around expectations, my recommendation is that, of course, when you get a job, you show up at that job dressed a certain way, you conduct yourself in a particular manner, they offer you a salary, they tell you what they expect of you, and as long as everybody is doing what was agreed upon, and those are agreed upon expectations that everybody needs to live up to, including you maintaining your dress and the way you behave, and what you're living up to, what you said you would do, and same with them, and they should be treating you with respect, and you should be treating them with respect. So so that pretty much is my take on expectations. I promise you, if you have somebody that you love, right, and you want to improve your relationship with that person, and you find yourself frustrated all the time because of your expectations of them, you can do one of two things, or actually both. Anything that's super important to you, I suggest that you have a conversation with them and lead with all positive things. Don't just jump in and say, hey, you got to change. No. Lead in with, how important they are to you and how much you love them, and that you want both of you to be happy in a relationship, and then discuss what it is that, you feel, what expectation that you feel you have to have as a boundary or even a standard, right? And then anything else that is not do or die, you got to let it go. Because I promise you, when you let go of the expectations, the relationship improves. Why? Because the other person can feel that you've let go of those expectations. I promise you, they can feel it, and they'll appreciate it. Don't look for acknowledgement for it. That's not what you're doing. Do not do that. Just drop the expectations and sit back and watch what happens to the relationship. I can almost guarantee you, not always, depends on the person too, and what you're trying to deal with, all right? What your expectation is. If it is below your standard or outside your boundaries, well then, you need to do a deep dive with yourself onto what you can do about it. Because if you can't control the other person. They have to be in agreement, right? So enough is enough. If you have questions about this video, you can instant message me. You can put comments in this reel or this story. More than happy to help you if I can. You can visit my website, which is lisamichaels.org. Lots of information on there. I have a blog post on there around this very topic of expectations. And then I also, for next week, the next episode is about New Year's resolutions and why most of them fail and what you can do differently about that. I'm super excited about that. I look forward to seeing you next week. Same time, Monday night, 6 p.m., right here, Lisa Michaels, Facebook Live. Love to see you here. Stay blessed.